All right, Alexander, let's talk about what's going on in France. And we have some breaking news that Marine Le Pen has been acquitted in a case over hate speech laws. This case has been going on for a while, but it looks like Le Pen is all clear now. What's going on?
Well, it is indeed. I mean, this is clearly a situation where Le Pen is getting stronger in the electoral challenge to Macron, which is taking place. And I never took these charges, I should say, particularly seriously. She was simply posted some information about ISIS, saying what a terrible organization ISIS was. And bizarrely and ridiculously, despite the collective West, as it now apparently starting to call itself, referring to ISIS as a terrorist organization, Le Pen actually publicizing information about ISIS's atrocities that was deemed by French prosecutors to be hate crimes. Well, I think that was a ridiculous idea. I think that was an absurd and unsustainable case. It was clearly done to damage Le Pen. I think, in fact, it probably, in the long term, did the opposite. And, of course, the case has now been thrown out and she has been acquitted. Now, that gives her another clear run for the presidency next year, the election to the presidency next year. And what we are starting to see is more and more evidence of growing panic at the prospect of this on a part of a French establishment which is running out of ammunition and one sense is running out of road. Now, there's been a very interesting twist, which is that in a particular region of France, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region, the leader of the local right-wing party, I should stress the local establishment, Gaullist Republican Party, attempted to get into coalition with Macron's party for regional elections, which are due to take place there. And the idea was that these two parties would combine and keep Le Pen's party, the RN, at bay. But that provoked a major crisis within the Republican Party, the right-wing party, the Republicans, and it provoked a split. And in fact, the leader of the Republican Party who did that, I understand that he's actually been forced to step down. So we are seeing attempts being made by the French elite to consolidate all establishment traditional forces behind Macron in advance of the elections next year. But we are also seeing that attempting to do that is provoking fractures and opposition, especially in the French provinces and the French regions, with the establishment parties, as a result, fragmenting because many of their members are deeply hostile to Macron. And the result is that it's far from clear that this attempt to consolidate political forces behind Macron in order to keep Le Pen out is working. On the contrary, it might be accelerating a drift of support towards Le Pen. And in fact, Le Figaro, which is France's main establishment conservative right-wing newspaper, has actually said as much, that if this particular attempt to combine forces in this particular region doesn't work, then this attempt to unite against Le Pen, far from creating a sort of, breakwater against the tide that is coming in her direction. On the contrary, it could serve as a stepping stone on her way to power. So we are at a very interesting moment in France. It must be said, we still have the better part of a year before these elections take place, but it's increasingly looking as if it's becoming an issue now directly between Le Pen and Macron, as if all other candidates are being pulled out or are finding it impossible to break in. into this race. So it's becoming a race between these two leaders. Macron, of course, is becoming increasingly unpopular. Le Pen has a stable base of support, which seems to be rising. There are indications that things in the economy in France, well, they've always been difficult, that they may be getting worse. So I suspect that 2022 is going to be by far Le Pen's best shot up to now. We'll see how it all turns out. But as I said, it's interesting to see these signs of desperation within the French elite starting to spread, even as these cases, these bogus scandals that they've concocted against Le Pen in order to knock her out, as they steadily fail and fall apart.
All right. Do we have any polling numbers or any indication where they
they
stand?
vary, and of course, they vary, and of course, can I just remind our viewers that opinion polls, I'm afraid, in the modern world, are not quite as reliable as they once were. We've just been through an election in the United States, which was showing polling figures that turned out to be completely wrong. And of course, that comes after another election in 2016, where it was the same problem again. And in France, given again the structural bias, and I have to say that, of the polling agencies, we can't take these polls that appear as reliable. But some of them put Le Pen and Macron absolutely level. Others put Macron slightly ahead. But none of them give him a decisive or strong lead. And that is even before the first round. And on the assumption that the two of them get through to the second round, it looks as if Le Pen's support has increased markedly since the last election 4 years ago.
Yeah, but you said she's still behind. So she still has some ground to make up.
Well, according to the opinion polls, I mean, I want to stress that because, as I said, one has to assume that these opinion polls are reliable. And my own personal view, by the way, and I'll be straightforward about this, knowing France, is that they're probably not. So the very fact that the gap now is so small, it's in single figures, and the very fact that other opinion polls show them level pegging suggests to me that in reality, Le Pen may be at least level with Macron and quite even possibly ahead. So don't assume that these polling figures are accurate. If you remember, during the US election, the US presidential election, we actually did a video about opinion polling there. And that was at a time when I think opinion polls were giving Biden a double-digit lead. And I said at the time that this is not to be taken too seriously. And it turned out that this is exactly right. Our analysis on that was spot on. I think in France it's exactly the same. It is remarkable that Le Pen has reached the point where in a head-to-head battle with Macron, she is at the very least, I think, level pegging. She might even actually be ahead. I can't prove it, but that's what I think. And frankly, I would argue it against anyone.
Okay, Macron does such a terrible job in France. Do you have any indication who exactly supports him? I mean, where's his base?
Oh, absolutely. The elite is his base. I mean, France is perhaps the most elitist controlled society in the West, and that's saying something. I mean, the whole nature of French politics and society is that it is structured around a very powerful concentration of power made up of elite individuals in Paris. Unless you've witnessed it yourself, it's difficult to conceive of how strong it is. And these people, of course, they're in finance, they're in the usual finance, the diplomatic corps, the intelligence community. France has a very elaborate and very powerful intelligence community. The media, the middle class, some sections of the middle class that have bought into many of the same views that people, of course, in other Western countries, including the United States and Britain have. And of course, there's that very large immigrant community in France, which can be relied upon to support Macron in this kind of election. So there's all of this, all this usual coalition of people that you would expect to see supporting someone like Macron. And they exist, and they're strong, and they cannot be underestimated. I mean, and of course, Macron also has the machinery of the state working for him, which is very powerful in France. He's got all the big media behind him. He's got big tech behind him. He's got all those advantages. Le Pen's support comes from blue-collar workers and the French regions and what used to be called La France Profonde. That's the dividing line now. So it's not so different from the United States, where we saw that same pattern in the two latest presidential elections. It's the same in France, only perhaps it's rather more marked in France, in the sense that you probably find more widespread conservative sentiments amongst a part of the old middle class, especially in the small towns around France, than you would find amongst similar people in the United States. One of the interesting things, by the way, and I just want to mention, is one of the most bizarre and I find slightly comical things, is that Macron, and this is a sign of how desperate he is, in my opinion, is trying to distance himself from this elitist image that he has and from the perception that he's backed by the elite, in that he's actually announced the closure of ENA, the École Nationale d'Administration. Now, for those who don't know, this is an elite school. It's a sort of tertiary school where young people who want to join the French civil service go, and it has incredibly tough and rigorous entrance exams, and the position of people in the civil service in France has classically depended upon the results of their final examinations at this school. So if you are in the top 1%, you go straight to the top. At the age of 23, you become a senior official in the finance ministry. Well, that was created, ENA was created as a sort of Republican egalitarian school back in the 1940s in order to be able to draw young people from all elements of French society. And that is what it was right up until about the 50s. In practice, what it has become is a kind of French Harvard. All the sort of usual people, the rich, plutocratic, wealthy people, have been able to find ways of getting their children into it. And it's become very much a symbol in France of the elite and of the distancing of the elite from the nation. And Macron, who is a graduate of that school, as most French presidents since it was established have been, he took the step of announcing that he was going to abolish it. Only in reality, he's not abolishing it. He's just reconstituting it under a different name. But this is an example of Macron trying to distance himself from the elite that he belongs to and is a part of. It's cosmetic. It doesn't really fool anybody, but it's a sign again of how desperate he's becoming. It's like trying to change Harvard, not by changing Harvard, but by giving it a different name, if you like.
Right. All right. We'll continue to follow this story. We'll leave it there, guys. I'll put a discount code.
Yeah.
I'll put a discount code to the Duran shop down below, 10% off. You'll find that code linked down below. Take care.